Welcome back to my class for an important lesson entitled Vocational Education and the Vocationalization of Education. I will be using two different terms. One is vocational and another one is vocationalization in education. So to begin with, let us have a basic knowledge and understanding about these two different terms. Frankly speaking, vocational education is concerned with the training on vocation. It is related to productivity. Vocational education prepares individuals for jobs and it has adequate employment potentialities. It helps in broadening of horizon. It leads to dignity of labor. It is helpful in the maximum utilization of the material resources of the country. When vocational education is mixed with general education, it is called vocationalization of education. Vocationalization of education is designed to introduce manual skills in general education, and it means training in some vocations at the secondary, high secondary level with general education. The term vocationalization refers to efforts by schools to include in their curriculum those practical subjects which are likely to generate among students some basic knowledge, skills, and dispositions that might prepare them to think of becoming skilled workers or to enter manual operations. The inclusion of practical or industrial arts subjects, especially of the curriculum of secondary schools, as part of the program of general education is considered an essential element in the vocationalization of education. Of academic and vocational education. I tell you, the integration of academic and vocational education is an educational reform strategy conceptualized by vocational educators, supported by the business community, and articulated by policymakers in the 1990s. It is vocational education's attempt to improve the educational and employment opportunities of youth who will face new technologies and business management systems that demand high-level workers' skills. Integration can apply to all high schools. Integration is potentially a reform that can be undertaken by all types of schools and for students with varying backgrounds and aspirations. It should not be viewed as applying only to vocational programs. Several of the early innovators were mission schools that serve primarily college-bound students. And integration should be approached as a school improvement effort. Integration touch on all aspects of the school curriculum, pedagogy, organization, relationship to the community, and so on. So because of its potential to change the school in fundamental ways, it should be viewed as a means to organize the focus a school improvement effort. Question is, why should the education of academic stream be integrated with vocational education? The answer is, triggering the reform movement in vocational education are increasingly high dropout and illiteracy rates, along with employers' criticisms that schools are delivering workers who lack problem-solving abilities, higher order thinking skills, and communication employability skills, all crucial for work in a global economy. Vocational educators have been criticized for promoting overly specific training and encouraging a dual structure that segregates vocational and academic education. So, academic educators, on the other hand, suffer criticism for providing curriculum that lacks participatory forms of learning and opportunities for students to connect learning to real world events. So in addition, both academic and vocational educators are facing reduce enrollments and program offerings, and increase graduation requirements with external pressures for accountability. Thus, the integration of vocational and academic education offers an opportunity to effect change in an education system that is in need of reform. Say, integration is a distinct approach. For it provides the following things. First, it provides richer, better sequence curricula that enhance academic and generic skills needed by all workers. Number two, uh, it provides facilitative instruction rather than didactic that motivates students to learn and provides them with the practical and the applied understanding of the world. Third, it gives increased collaboration and coordination among academic and vocational teachers to create a more unified schooling experience. It gives opportunity for more attention to the skills and knowledge the students need to transition effectively from school to work and college. Of academic education with vocational education provides a wide range of benefits. Uh, Integration, to begin with, integration flourishes in a permissive regulatory environment. Integration efforts proceed better when state and local regulations support or at least do not impede local reforms. Common barriers include set time regulations, graduation requirements, non-acceptance of applied courses, college admission requirements, union seniority rules, certification processes, and teacher evaluation rules. Strict allocation of resources by a central office can also inhibit integration if it reduces a school's ability to channel funds towards teacher professional development. Secondly, integration can take years to implement. The fact is that the broad consensus among the early innovators was that reform would not be complete or advanced enough to permit an assessment of its effects for at least 5 years. So such a long-term endeavor needs committed leadership, relatively stable staffings, and is stable as well as generous funding to induce change and build new capacities. Most important are full support for continuing staff development and collaboration. Third, integration complements other current systemic reforms. Integration reform is consonant with calls for site-based management, mission-oriented schooling, increased teacher participation in decision making, and reforms to increase teacher professionalism and collegiality as well as improve pedagogy. And finally, all in all, integration reform appears to promote a healthy rethinking of education conventions. So, given sufficient support to succeed, the integration reform movement has the potential to create a much more flexible, equitable, and effective Indian secondary education, I should say. Let me take the opportunity to tell you some important information regarding vocationalization of secondary education in terms of aims and guidelines with special reference to the education scenario of the country. The aim of introducing vocational education at secondary level and higher secondary level is to enhance the employability of youth through demand-driven competency-based modular vocational courses and at the same time reduce the dropout rate at the secondary level. And secondly, the centrally sponsored scheme of vocationalization of secondary and higher secondary education approved by the government during September 2011. He has been recently revised on 12 February 2014 with a view to align it with the National Skill Qualification Framework, into which the NVQF is issued by the Ministry on 2nd September 2012 has been assimilated. The scheme covers vocational education from level 1 to level 4 of the NSQF, starting from class 9 up to class 12. And finally, the revised scheme, while introducing vocational education at the secondary level, seeks to integrate vocational education with general education and provide horizontal as well as vertical mobility to the students. It envisages close partnership with industry in the design, development, delivery, assessment, and the certification of skills content. The planning and implementation strategy with regard to vocationalization of secondary education in the country consists of selection of traits on the basis of skill gap analysis, selection of schools, assessment of infrastructure and resources, as well as convergence, mobilization of parents and the counseling of students, orientation of states as well as union territories officials, and sensitization of school principals, revision of scheme of subjects, curriculum and courseware, engaging vocational coordinator, teachers, resource persons, industry collaboration, assessment and certification, incentive to government-aided and private schools, implementation partners, convergence and coordination, monitoring, enabling smooth transition to higher educational work, and finally, credit framework. In particular, a feature associated with the process of vocationalization of education at the secondary level in the context of India is nothing but stagnation. The following are the important reasons for the stagnation of vocational education. Firstly, the main reason for the imbalance in secondary education in India was the traditional attraction for the white-collar professions and the general aversion among educated people to work with their hands. Secondly, uh, general education institutions were much cheaper to establish and maintain than vocational institutions. On the other hand, when resources were limited, general education gets the preference. Because of this imbalance in education, the number of educated unemployed in the country was gradually swelling. Thirdly, a very insignificant percentage of students joined the vocational institutions. To speak the truth, they join these institutions either they possess low intellectual ability or low economic status and were unable to bear college expenses. So they were considered as inferior to the students who receive general education. And finally, the prevailing social situation and the social attitudes indicate that response to the introduction of vocational courses at the higher secondary stage has not been encouraging. Clearly indicated that the process of vocationalization of education at the secondary school level in the country has been associated with a number of problems, and these are arranging here. Number one problem is unrestricted expansion of general education. Second is inadequate job opportunities and on-the-job training. Third problem is selection of suitable courses by the students. Fourth, lack of opportunity for vertical mobility. Fifth, lack of provision for guidance and counseling. Six, inadequate financial resource. Seven, one is lack of suitable evaluation tools. Number eight, apathetic attitude of the general public. Number nine, proper study of manpower needs. 10. Inadequate provision of stipends and scholarship for trainees. 11. Non-availability of well-equipped workshop and laboratory for research. 12. Lack of determined effort to divert students into various vocational courses. 13. Lack of cooperation of the state governments as well as other non-government agencies. Number 14. There is a high drop-out rate at secondary level. 15. Vocational education is presently offered at grade 11 and 12 only. 16. Both private and industry participation is lacking. Number 17, least number of vocational institutes are there in the country. Number 18, there is inadequacy of trained faculty. Number 19, vocationalization at all levels has not been successful. Number 20, there is lack of new sectors of vocational education and skill training. Number 21, there is a good shortage of instructors and uh, instructors and the teachers in the country. Number 22, uh, current education system is non-responsive to the skill demands of the existing and the future industry, leading to a supply-demand gap on the various counts. Number 23, outside the school system, relevant vocational training centers are ill-equipped to handle the demand and are accessible to only a selected number of students who have passed at least level 10 and 10 plus. Number 24, there is a huge demand supply skill gap. I should say 90% of jobs in India are skill based and telling the requirement of the vocational training, and it is estimated that only 5% of the youth in the country are vocationally trained. Number 25 is most of the vocational education training institutes are characterized by structurally rigid and outdated centralized syllabi that do not have much synchronization with the prevailing market conditions. And finally, there is absence of monitoring committee at all. Process of vocational education or the vocationalization of education at the secondary school level in the country is found to be less effective uh, and thereby creating a great divide for two important reasons. Firstly, the fundamental problem is that while vocational infrastructure has been set up in remote rural areas to combat rural poverty, nearly all the jobs that the students are trained for continue to exist in urban areas. And secondly, many of the students who followed had never traveled beyond their village classes, let alone their districts. So when they were relocated for jobs, many of them fell ill or suffered from extreme homesickness. The result is that most came home to their villages. So from one research activity, it is found that some 38% left job uh, uh, for unhappy with location, and the 23% left job because of unhappy with food and accommodation. 19% left as a result of language problems, and a lesser percentage left job for the reason of marriage, low salaries, and fight with supervisors and so on. My dear students, there is need to bridge the skill gap through vocational training. Let us start with the harsh realities. The rate of employability in India has noted a sharp decline in the past few years. Gone are the days when India was considered rich in talent, but the skilling is something that the youth are lacking. Naturally, its source report say that 95% of Indian technical or non-technical graduates are unemployable, giving rise to what people coin as an industry institute gap. At present, nearly 80% new entrants to the country's workforce get little or no opportunity for skills education. Merely 2.5% of our workforce is exposed to formal vocational training. Hence, a systematic program of vocational education is required to be implemented to bridge the industry institute gap in terms of providing the required skill level requirements through vocational education provided, especially at the secondary level of school education. So here, through this lesson, uh, I am presenting a list of 9 vocational institutes of national importance. This include National Institute of Technical Teachers Training and Research Bhopal, National Institute of Technical Teachers Training and Research Kolkata, National Council for Vocational Education and Training, National Course on Vocational Training, National Institute for Technical Training, National Institute for Education and Training, National Institute for Technical Trainings, National Institute of Skills and Vocational Studies, Delhi, and the ninth one is the National Open School, previously known as National Institute of Open Schooling. Training, truly speaking, has been successful in India only in industrial training institutes and that too in engineering trades, right? So there are many private institutes in India which offer courses in vocational training and finishing, but most of them have not been recognized by the government. So therefore, steps should be taken to recognize appropriate institutes having the required criteria. You see, vocational education strengthens any country's employment and the same way its economy. India, being a developing world, has come a long way to enhance and implement vocational education. It goes saying that the developing nation like India requires that every student should have productive experience as part of school education. The provision of work experience in the school will develop a sense of dignity of labor. Therefore, the school curriculum should prepare every child for productive work because it is essential for the survival of society through vocational education and the vocationalization of education. The presentation of violation, and let me say thank you.